Roosevelt once again with Tweed's Pod. Now, we've got a very special guest, the captain of our favorite ship, the aircraft carrier CVN-71, the Theodore Roosevelt, Captain Craig Clapperton, who has been leading her for a couple of years now, I believe. There is a significant chance that this year, this coming spring, the ship will invite us to join them for their family cruise. This is a wonderfully exciting event. The ship's crew invites their family to come, and we go out and sail around, and the ship puts on a tremendous show. And they've kindly invited us to join them, so stay tuned for that. But in any case, let's get on with this. Captain, are you there?
I sure am. How are you, Mr. Roosevelt? It's great to join you today.
Well, it's great to have you with us, and thank you very much for joining us. You know, I think our listeners would like to know a little more about you and how you came to be captain of the Theodore Roosevelt.
Okay, well, I joined the Navy in 1989. I was commissioned out of Penn State Naval ROTC, and I started out my time in the Navy as an A6 bombardier navigator, flying A6 intruders. I did that for a few years, and then the Navy decommissioned the A6, so I transitioned over to EA-6B prowlers and continued to fly off of many different aircraft carriers, including Theodore Roosevelt, up through to and including my command tour, and I commanded VAQ-141 on board Theodore Roosevelt, so that was my very first command. During that time, I certainly never imagined that I would be the CEO of this fantastic ship, but as the way things worked out, and I was very fortunate, very blessed to have the opportunity, I was selected to go to Navy nuclear power training and start the carrier training pipeline. I went off and I was the XO of Harry S. Truman. From there, I went and commanded USS Mount Whitney, which is the 6th Fleet flagship. And then after that, again, very blessed, very fortunate, and honored and humbled to have been selected to be the 14th commanding officer of USS Theodore Roosevelt, a job I never thought I would have the opportunity to get the chance to do, but it's just been an absolutely fantastic opportunity, and it's a great blessing to continue to serve with the fantastic sailors here in the United States Navy.
Well, we're delighted to have you join the long list of superb captains, and we were delighted you were able to come to our annual meeting at Sagamore Hill and bring and show off your Junior Officer of the Year. Anyway, why did the Navy choose to name an aircraft carrier after TR, and how has the ship honored his legacy?
The way that Theodore Roosevelt was named is Secretary John Lehman was Secretary of the Navy, and the Secretary of the Navy has the privilege to get to choose the names and approve the names of ships in the Navy when they're commissioned. Theodore Roosevelt is one of his heroes in his life, one of the people he's always looked up to as he grew up and through his political career and his business career. And so when he became Secretary of the Navy, he knew that the first time he got to name a capital ship, he wanted to name it after Theodore Roosevelt. And I think, you know, Theodore Roosevelt is an absolutely fantastic leader, politician, warrior, and just a great individual to name a ship after. You know, he's just a self-taught man, a tough, rugged man, a fierce competitor. He was a great political leader, a war hero, very successful in his family life. So he really encapsulates all the things that speak Navy and aircraft carrier and U.S. sailor. So he's just done all the right things in his life to be a great namesake for a ship. And I think perhaps even most significantly, you know, he was very involved in the Navy, finding Professor Langley and ultimately Glenn Curtiss, who were the people that designed and built the first airplane that flew off of a ship. They designed the Curtiss pusher that flew off the USS Birmingham and eventually the USS Pennsylvania. So Theodore Roosevelt, really even before naval aviation existed, was really a very vital and key part of naval aviation. So I think he's a great namesake. And you talk about how does the ship honor that. It starts off right when you come on board the ship. You see Bully the Moose, this enormous moose head that's right down there on our hangar bay, and that signifies so much about the man. The fact that he started a third political party, it signifies the significance and how successful he was as a politician. It signifies how important outdoorsmanship and to be a conservationist was to the man. And throughout the ship are plaques and pictures and photos of Theodore Roosevelt, and his quotes are all over the walls of the ship. to remind the sailors of so many fantastic quotes that he had. And even more subtle things. For example, we named both of our small boats that we keep on board the aircraft carrier are Edith and Alice, of course, named after the president's wives. So really, the ship is just everywhere you go, you're reminded about Theodore Roosevelt, about his family, about his successes as a warrior, his successes as a politician, and really what he believed in. It's everywhere you go around the ship.
And you have a letter that he wrote, I believe, and I believe the letter was written even before the Wright brothers' flight. It's in the import cabin, isn't it?
That's a fact, yeah, absolutely. So the letter was written March 25th in 1898, so several years there before the Wright brothers actually flew. And as the Assistant Secretary in the War Department there in the Navy Department, he became aware of some folks working on a flying machine, as he called it, and so he tasked the Navy to send some engineers and some operational specialists out there to look at it because, again, insightful man, he knew that aviation, that airplanes could not only have a great military advantage to the United States and become a crucial part of our military, but he also recognized the potential commercial impact of the United States writ large. So not only does it connect him directly to naval aviation, but it really shows what a forward thinker he was.
Tell our listeners some of your favorite stories about young crew members.
There are so many of them. One of the great opportunities that we had here recently, the CMC and I had our Sailors of the Year. We had just selected our Sailors of the Year around the same time that we selected the Junior Officer of the Year, Lieutenant Udone, who you mentioned earlier. But we also selected our Sailors of the Year. And so we had them up here for lunch in the import cabin. And the CMC asked them, tell me why you joined the Navy. Tell me about your path to becoming a U.S. Navy sailor. And the stories were wide and varied. But the theme that continued through all of them is every one of them overcame significant challenges in their life. Again, much like Theodore Roosevelt did to become a warrior and an outdoorsman. Every one of them overcame significant challenges in their life, whether they were family challenges, whether they were from broken homes, whether one of them came from the Philippines, a very poor family in the Philippines, and immigrated to the United States and became a sailor because she wanted to accelerate her path to citizenship. And so not only did they overcome these obstacles to become sailors, but once they became sailors, they became absolutely exemplary sailors, role model sailors for others to follow. And so it's that great passion for leadership and for success and personal drive that each of those sailors have. And when you hear them each individually, they're heartwarming and they remind you why you serve in the Navy. And as a CO, I'm very fortunate. I get to hear a lot of great individual stories like that, and they really remind you why you do what you do.
Tell us something of the ship's recent deployment.
It was a year ago now that we returned. The time has really flown by. But back in 2015, the ship went on a very unique deployment. It was an around-the-world combat deployment. So the ship left Norfolk, Virginia back in March of 2015. And it went all the way around the world. It operated in the Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the Arabian Gulf, the Indian Ocean, and ultimately the Pacific Ocean before she arrived in November, at the end of November 2015, here in San Diego, which is her new home port. So very unique to go on an around-the-world combat deployment, and even more unique that you switch home ports after that, and then really a first ever and historic event for the Navy as part of what we called the 3-carrier hull swap. Because as I think you know, we have to refuel aircraft carriers about every 25 years. Carriers last for 50. We have to refuel them at 25. And one of the reasons we did this around-the-world deployment was to enable George Washington, that was in Japan, to go to Norfolk for her refueling. So as part of that whole shuffle, George Washington left Japan, went to Norfolk. Ronald Reagan left San Diego and went to Japan. And Theodore Roosevelt left Norfolk and came here to San Diego. And that's the first time the Navy's ever shuffled 3 carriers like that. And they also did a very unique thing in that they tried to keep the crew, the sailors and their families, to the max extent possible in the hometown that they started this whole event in. So it really involved about 1,800 plus sailors from each ship leaving the ship they started on and then swapping through all ships and then eventually ending up on a completely different ship than when they started. So it was an enormous undertaking and a really historic way to end our deployment. And then, of course, during that deployment, the highlight of that was 6 months of combat operations in the Northern Arabian Gulf in some of the most brutal conditions on Earth. Heat index and temperatures in excess of 130, 140 degrees for months at a time. And the crew in the embarked Air Wing did a remarkable job. Sustained combat operations against ISIS in northern Iraq and eastern Syria, delivering over 1 million pounds of ordnance, and really being the impetus for a lot of the major cities in Iraq and Syria to start being turned back over to the Iraqi government and to Syrian Kurdish forces and others, cities like Ramadi, Fallujah, Kobani, Baji, the list goes on. So very, very proud of the incredible work that our sailors did on that deployment.
And we are very proud of you all and what we love to call our ship. Well, there's a lot of talk about the future of the Navy, and particularly carriers in the Navy. And so I'm wondering what you think about that and the role that you think that the Theodore Roosevelt will play.
Well, carriers will always be, and I think really have always been, sort of the 911 force of the military and certainly the Navy. Their incredible speed, maneuverability, their sustainability allows them to get to really any place on the planet very quickly. And then once we're there, we can operate with impunity and with sovereignty. And aircraft carriers, we like to say, is 4.5 acres of sovereign U.S. territory wherever it goes. And really, aircraft carriers, and the CNO said this himself when we went to debrief him on that historic deployment. He said, no other unit can do what a carrier strike group can across the full spectrum of military operations. And that's everything from humanitarian assistance and disaster relief to maritime security operations, to deterrence and presence operations, freedom and navigation operations, and up to and including major combat operations. A carrier really is an incredible force multiplier and an incredible asset for any one of those missions, and I really think it will continue to be the centerpiece of the Navy, and I think they remain a very capable and impressive platform for our military moving forward.
Tell us a little about what has been the most fulfilling part of your naval career and your time in command of the Theodore Roosevelt.
You just really meet some incredible young men and women, and you get the opportunity to serve and work with these incredible young men and women each and every day in the Navy. You see them challenged in the arena, as Theodore Roosevelt would say, and you really, I think you see them at their best when they're in those scenarios. And for 27 and a half years, I've had that opportunity, and that's really what's kept me around and kept me doing this, is the opportunity to serve with these great young men and women, to see them perform, to see them excel, and to see them achieve such great things in their life. Whether it's if they stay in the Navy or if they go out into civilian life, if they go on to get a more advanced education, it doesn't matter. They achieve great successes in all those areas, and it's just it truly makes you feel great, good to be an American when you see these young men and women achieve what they achieve, whether it be in the military or out of the military.
I think the Navy has really done an exemplary effort at that, taking young men and young women from often disadvantaged backgrounds and give them the pride and the drive to become great American citizens. So congratulations to you and all your officers and to all your crew. And thank you very much for joining us on this podcast. And we all look forward to the opportunity of going on the family cruise in the spring. So good luck to our ship.
All right, well, thanks a lot, and I really appreciate you, the Roosevelt family, and the Theodore Roosevelt Association for supporting the ship and keeping us involved and helping us to remind us of the legacy of Theodore Roosevelt and helping us to keep that alive here on board the ship. I think that's really an important aspect of the ship and her namesake, and I look forward to the opportunity to hopefully getting some members of the family and the TR Association out here for our family day cruise, which will be sometime in the late spring, early summer of 2017, I believe. And as soon as I have that information, I'll make sure I let you know.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Captain. And we look forward to seeing you in the flesh again.
Sounds great, sir. I look forward to it as well.